The lobby of St. Grace Heart Institute looked more like a hotel than a hospital. Marble floors, a glass ceiling, and banners strung up for Pediatric Heart Hope Day. Bright red balloons swayed above the crowd. Everyone smiled as though they weren't here for sick children. I wasn't smiling. My daughter Lila clutched my hand, her stuffed fox pressed against her chest. She was 5 years old, far too small for her age, her breaths shallow from the defect in her heart. Every step we took toward the registration desk felt like we were walking into a spotlight. "Patient name?" the woman asked. "Lila Parker," I said. "Mother's name?" "Emily Parker." The woman typed quickly. I pretended not to notice the curious stares from other families. But above us, a giant monitor played a highlight reel. Surgeons in scrubs, nurses smiling, children holding balloons. The video ended on a man removing his mask, blue eyes sharp and confident. Dr. Ethan Cole. My ex-husband. My stomach dropped. I turned my face away, hoping Lila hadn't noticed, but the monitor looped again, larger than life. Ethan had become the hospital's star, the face of their campaigns, the man they credited with breakthroughs in pediatric cardiac surgery. And he had no idea that his own daughter was standing right here, waiting for help. The nurse called out, "Parker, Lila?" I squeezed my daughter's hand. "That's us." As we stood, another door opened. Cameras flashed. A group entered, the board members flanked by doctors. At the center, Ethan walked in. Taller, sharper, wrapped in authority. And beside him, her arm threaded through his, was Dr. Celeste Grant, hospital cardiologist, daughter of the Institute's director and Ethan's fiancée. Her diamond ring caught the lobby lights. Her smile was perfect. I froze. Ethan's eyes swept across the room. For a moment, they landed on me, then on Lila. He blinked, his confident stride faltering just enough to be noticed. I turned quickly, following the nurse into triage. My pulse thundered louder than the monitors. Inside, they took Lila's vitals. Numbers dropped on the screen. Oxygen low. The nurse murmured, "She needs intervention soon." I gripped the binder in my lap, thick with medical records, grants, and every desperate plea I'd written to charities. Then the door opened again. "Is this the charity intake?" a voice asked. I knew that voice. Ethan stepped inside, his eyes falling immediately on us. His breath caught. "Emily?" The binder slipped from my hands. Papers scattered, test results, insurance denials, and one folded ultrasound photo I had carried for 5 years. It slid across the floor and stopped at Ethan's shoe. He bent down, picked it up, his eyes widened. Behind him, Celeste appeared, elegant and sharp. She glanced at the photo, then at me, then at Lila, calculating. "This is a clinical space, Dr. Grant," the nurse warned. "I know," Celeste said smoothly. "I just need a word with my fiancé." My chest tightened. Ethan stared at the ultrasound, then at me. His voice shook. "Emily, is she?" "Don't," I whispered. Celeste's smile sharpened. "Of course, transparency is important in our program. Donors expect honesty, especially about a child's parentage." Heat rushed to my face. "There is no father," I snapped, but the lie scraped raw in my throat. The nurse interrupted gently. "We'll need a cheek swab for our genomic registry. Routine for congenital cases." Ethan's gaze locked on mine. He knew what that meant. I knew it too. My hands trembled as I gathered the papers. "Come on, Lila. We're done here." I pulled her close and rushed toward the door. Behind me, Ethan's voice cracked the silence. "Emily?" "Wait." I didn't. But just before the door swung shut, I saw Celeste accept the labeled swab kit from the nurse. And there it was, Lila Parker, DNA registry. I found a quiet chapel in the corner of the hospital. Wooden pews, colored light spilling from stained glass, silence that pressed against my skin. Lila lay with her head in my lap, whispering, "I'm tired, Mama." "I know, baby. We'll find another hospital, one with a fish tank in the lobby, remember?" She nodded, clutching her fox. I pulled out my phone and called Marisol, our nonprofit caseworker. "Cancel it," I said. "We can't stay here." "Emily, if you leave, we lose the grant. We'll have to start over. Lila doesn't have that kind of time." "I don't care. I can't let him." My voice broke. "I can't let them touch her." A shadow moved at the doorway. "Emily." It was Ethan. Behind him stood Celeste, arms folded, her engagement ring glittering like a warning. "Don't follow me," I whispered. Ethan stepped forward anyway. "Please, just answer me. Is she my daughter?" I stayed silent. Celeste's voice cut through the stillness. "The registry swab will confirm everything. Science doesn't lie." I clutched Lila tighter. My heart thundered, because I already knew. Once the results came back, There would be no more hiding, and the war for my daughter had just begun. I am not extraordinary. When people ask what I do, I tell them I teach third grade. Their eyes soften, like they're picturing bulletin boards with paper butterflies and multiplication flashcards. They don't see the woman who drags herself home after conferences with parents, after playground duty, after hours spent grading spelling tests in a silent apartment. They see a teacher. A nice woman, invisible in every way that counts. But I am also the woman who once believed in forever. I met Ethan Cole when we were both broke students at Ohio State. He was pre-med, always hunched over anatomy diagrams, scribbling notes so intensely he forgot to eat. I was studying education, tutoring kids from low-income families to pay for rent and ramen. We collided in the library one night, literally. My stack of children's lit books spilled across the floor, and his tower of medical journals crashed down like an avalanche. We laughed, we gathered each other's pages, and we didn't stop talking until dawn. I fell in love with his hunger. Not hunger for me, at least not at first, but hunger to matter. He wanted to cut into hearts and repair them, to leave the world different than he found it. I believed in that. I believed in him. We got married in a courthouse with plastic flowers on the desk. He slipped a thin silver band on my finger. We promised forever, with the optimism of two people who thought love could outrun bills and exhaustion. Our first apartment had peeling paint and neighbors who argued through the walls. We ate takeout on the floor, laughing when the power flickered out. We made plans, how he'd become a surgeon, how I'd have my own classroom, how one day we'd trade ramen for real dinners. At first, it was enough. But after 2 years, no children came. At first, we told ourselves it was timing. Then, it became a quiet ache, a silence that grew heavier with each passing month. Baby showers hurt. Friends' announcements stung. I told myself patience was a virtue, but deep down I was already mourning something I hadn't even had. Then Ethan's focus sharpened. He applied for research programs, stayed late in labs, skipped dinners. He spoke in terms of fellowships and cardiothoracic breakthroughs. I tried to cheer him on. I clapped at his small victories. But I felt the space between us widen. The night he ended it, he sat on the edge of our bed, his hands clasped so tightly his knuckles were white. "Emily," he said, his voice trembling, "I love you. But I can't do this anymore. I need to focus on medicine, on research, on becoming who I'm meant to be. Family, marriage, it's not part of the plan right now." The plan. As if love had been a line item he could erase. I begged him to reconsider, but his mind was made up. Our marriage dissolved in a courthouse as quickly as it had been made. He walked away with ambition burning in his eyes. And I was left alone. Until 2 weeks later, I discovered I was pregnant. I stared at the 2 pink lines on that test in disbelief. My first instinct was to call him. But then I remembered his words, his certainty that family wasn't part of the plan. If I told him, he'd resent me. He might even resent the child. So I chose silence. I kept my pregnancy hidden, even from colleagues. I wore loose sweaters, I worked through swollen ankles, I graded papers with one hand while resting the other on my growing belly. At night, I whispered promises to the child inside me, that I would be enough, that I would give her love, even if the world gave us nothing else. When Lila was born, she was perfect and terrifyingly small. Her cries pierced me with both joy and fear. For a few weeks, I thought maybe we had made it. But then she turned blue when she cried too long. She struggled to breathe after feedings. Panic became a constant companion. Doctors named it congenital heart defect, tetralogy of Fallot. The words were too big. The bills were bigger. I worked and worked, teaching by day, tutoring by night, saving pennies in envelopes. I sold my wedding ring to pay for medication. I became an expert in pulse oximeters, in reading numbers at 3 a.m., in holding my child upright so she could breathe. The world told me to give up. But I didn't. Eventually, I found help. A nonprofit organization that partnered with hospitals to cover surgeries for children with heart defects. They gave me hope where I had none. They told me we had a slot at St. Grace Heart Institute, one of the best in the country. I thought it was salvation. Until I saw Ethan's face plastered across the hospital's banners, praised as the man who had changed pediatric cardiology. Until I learned he was engaged to Celeste Grant, daughter of the hospital director, cardiologist herself, the woman whose family funded the very program keeping my daughter alive. The irony was cruel. I told myself I could stay invisible, that Ethan wouldn't notice us, that I could keep Lila's secret locked away. But when he listened to her heartbeat in that triage room, I saw recognition dawn in his eyes. And I knew the life I had built on silence was about to collapse. I am Emily Parker, teacher, mother, ex-wife of a man who left me behind, keeper of a secret that has finally slipped from my grasp. And I am terrified of what comes next. At St. Grace Heart Institute, the lobby gleamed with marble and glass, sunlight spilling through high atriums. But if you looked closer, you saw the layers. Donors' names carved in bronze plaques, VIP lounges separated from the general waiting areas. Families with money walked confidently, while those like me clutched folders and hoped someone might take pity. I sat in the pediatric wing with Lila, where cartoon dolphins swam across the painted walls and balloons bobbed from plastic weights. The hospital tried to look cheerful, but the smell of antiseptic clung to everything. Children shuffled past with IV poles, their gowns swallowing their small bodies. Parents whispered into phones, voices brittle with exhaustion. It was supposed to feel like hope. Instead, it felt like a silent competition, whose child was sick enough, whose story was sad enough, whose prayers might be answered. And hovering over it all was the Grant family. The Grants weren't just doctors. They were the hospital. Dr. William Grant had been director for 2 decades. His daughter Celeste was the face of the pediatric program, her name printed on every brochure, every plaque, every glossy newsletter. And her foundation, funded by her family's wealth, decided which children received charity slots. My daughter's life depended on them. And now, Ethan belonged to them too. The moment I saw him in the lobby beside Celeste, I understood. He wasn't just another surgeon here. He was their prize, their golden boy. The success story they paraded at galas. The man who had clawed his way up from nothing and now stood at the pinnacle, holding Celeste Grant's hand. I wanted to believe we could slip through unnoticed. That I could keep my head down, fill out forms, and disappear into the system until Lila's surgery was complete. But I should have known better. Secrets don't survive in hospitals, not when every detail is recorded, measured, filed into systems you can't control. The illusion cracked during our case review meeting. Families were called into a conference room, small, windowless, with a long table and 2 bright lights. I expected a panel of doctors. Instead, when the door opened, Ethan walked in. And beside him, in her tailored blazer, was Celeste. He froze for a fraction of a second when he saw me. Then his eyes slid to Lila, who was drawing quietly in her coloring book, her oxygen saturation monitor glowing faintly on her finger. Celeste noticed his hesitation. Her smile tightened. "This is Lila Parker, 5 years old," the coordinator read. "Candidate for corrective surgery next quarter." Celeste clasped her hands, her diamond ring flashing. "Of course. We're honored to have her in our program." Her voice was warm, but her eyes never left Ethan's. He cleared his throat. "Her case is complex. Her oxygen numbers indicate we may need to prioritize sooner." The coordinator blinked, surprised. Doctors didn't usually advocate like that in front of parents. Ethan's tone had been protective, personal. I felt my chest tighten, not from gratitude, fear. Celeste placed a hand on his arm. "We'll review all cases objectively," she said smoothly. Then she turned to me, her smile professional but sharp as glass. "Miss Parker, I'm sure you understand. Resources are limited. We rely on transparency and trust when allocating them." The words were polite. The meaning was not. She suspected. Maybe not everything, not yet, but enough. I forced a smile, my voice steady even though my palms sweated. All I care about is my daughter's health. But inside, my heart pounded. She knows. She's watching, and she holds all the power. After the meeting, I tried to focus only on Lila. On the way she giggled when the therapy dog visited the ward. On the way she pressed her fox against the fish tank, telling him to make friends. On the stickers she collected, stars and rainbows covering her gown. But every time I lifted my eyes, I saw Ethan, moving through the wing like he belonged to it. Nurses deferred to him. Parents looked at him like he was salvation. He was the man who could save their children, and he kept glancing back at us. I hated myself for noticing, for remembering the boy who studied in libraries with coffee stains on his sleeves, for remembering the man who once whispered promises in a crumbling apartment, for feeling the ache of something I had buried years ago. But this wasn't about me, it was about survival. Because this hospital wasn't just a place of healing, it was an arena. Every smile from Celeste, every look from Ethan, every form I signed, it was all part of a battle I hadn't agreed to fight. I thought coming here was about saving my daughter. Now I see it's about proving we deserve to be saved. I was hurrying down the hospital steps, clutching Lila's folder against my chest, when I felt it. Eyes on me. Celeste Grant stood near the valet stand, phone in hand, gown shimmering like it belonged on a runway, not a hospital sidewalk. Our eyes met. She didn't smile. She didn't need to. Her gaze traveled from my scuffed shoes to the worn folder in my arms, then back to my face. And then, just one sentence. Soft enough that only I could hear. Some doors aren't meant for everyone to walk through. She slipped into her black car, door shutting with a quiet finality. I stood frozen on the pavement, Lila's folder pressed so tightly against me that the edges bit into my skin. That was all it took. A single line, a single look. Celeste hadn't just warned me, she had marked the battlefield. Hospitals aren't just about medicine, they're about image. At St. Grace, image was everything. Donor luncheons, charity galas, carefully staged press releases, and if your child was part of the program, you became part of the performance. I found that out the hard way. A week after Lila's surgery was rescheduled, I received an email from the hospital. Parents of pediatric patients are invited to attend a donor appreciation luncheon. Children are welcome. Media will be present. Attendance is strongly encouraged. Strongly encouraged meant mandatory. If I didn't show up, it would look ungrateful. And ungrateful families had a way of losing their spots altogether. So I dressed Lila in her nicest dress, a yellow one with daisies, and braided her hair. I put on a blazer I hadn't worn since my teaching interviews. We walked into the ballroom with its chandeliers and white tablecloths, surrounded by people who spoke the language of wealth fluently. At the front of the room, Celeste Grant stood with a microphone, flawless as always, thanking donors for their generosity. Beside her, Ethan smiled for cameras, the perfect surgeon, the perfect fiancé. My stomach twisted. I tried to blend in among the other families. Lila sat beside me, coloring on the back of the program, oblivious to the glances around us. I kept my binder close, the weight of our entire life pressed between its pages. Then Celeste's voice cut through the room. "We are honored to introduce some of our youngest patients and their families," she announced. "Their stories remind us why your support matters." One by one, families were invited on stage. Parents spoke about their gratitude. Children waved shyly at the cameras. Donors dabbed their eyes with napkins. Then I heard it. Emily Parker and her daughter Lila. I froze. A volunteer touched my shoulder. "That's you." I wanted to refuse, to run, but all eyes were on us. Cameras flashing. Donors waiting for another heartwarming story. So I stood, guiding Lila by the hand onto the stage. My legs felt hollow. Celeste smiled at us, microphone in hand. "This is Lila, 5 years old. She suffers from a congenital heart defect. Her mother, Emily, has shown great dedication in seeking her care." Polite applause. Cameras clicked. Then Celeste turned to me, her smile sharp. "Emily, would you like to share something with our donors about Lila's journey? Perhaps about her family history?" The question was a blade wrapped in velvet. I swallowed hard. "Lila is strong, she's brave. Every day she teaches me how to fight." The audience murmured with approval, but Celeste wasn't done. She leaned closer, microphone still on. "And her father?" I'm sure donors would appreciate transparency about medical history. Heart conditions can be hereditary after all. Gasps rippled through the audience. My vision blurred. Lila clutched my hand, confused. "There is no father," I said flatly. The room fell silent. Celeste's smile didn't falter. "No father," she repeated, her voice carrying across the ballroom. "Interesting." I felt heat burn up my neck. Murmurs spread among the tables. Some donors whispered, others frowned. And then Ethan stepped forward, his jaw clenched, eyes locked on me. "Celeste, that's enough." But it was too late. The damage was done. I wanted to vanish. Instead, I forced a brittle smile, squeezed Lila's hand, and whispered into the microphone. "All my daughter needs is a chance. That's all any of us want." I led her off the stage before anyone could stop us. Applause followed, thin and awkward, nothing like the warm ovations given to other families. Back in the corner, I sat shaking, humiliated in front of strangers who now saw me not as a mother fighting for her child, but as a woman with secrets. Lila looked up at me, her eyes wide. Mama, why did she ask about Daddy? I pulled her close, kissing her hair, holding her as if I could shield her from the world. My throat ached, but I whispered the only thing I could manage. Because some people care more about appearances than about love. Across the ballroom, Celeste basked in donor applause, and Ethan stared at me with a storm in his eyes. I knew then that this wasn't just about surgery anymore. This was a war. And Celeste had just fired the first shot in public. I barely remember driving home from the donor luncheon. My hands were shaking the whole way, like I'd been holding in a scream that refused to come out. That night, after putting Lila to bed, I sat alone at the kitchen table. The ticking clock on the wall was the only sound. The hospital's folder lay open in front of me, the DNA request form staring back like a silent threat. I pressed my palms into my eyes, but the memories came anyway. 5 years ago, another night like this, me, 8 months pregnant, collapsed on the cold bathroom tiles. My body was racked with pain and I thought, this is it. I'm going to lose her. I remember calling Ethan's number, then stopping halfway. He had already chosen his path. He was chasing his fellowship, his dream. I was just a shadow left behind. Instead, I called a taxi. The driver didn't speak much English. I was barely able to explain through the contractions. At the ER, under the harsh fluorescent lights, I signed my own admission papers with trembling hands. No husband, no family. Just me and the life inside me, fighting to hold on. And when Lila was born weeks later, tiny and fragile, I swore I would never let her feel unwanted. A sob ripped through me now, dragging me back to the present. I grabbed the DNA form and crushed it in my fist. If Ethan learned the truth, what then? Would he swoop in as the hero? Would Celeste weaponize it to crush us completely? I looked toward Lila's room. Her soft breathing reached me through the thin walls. My daughter was all I had ever had. And the thought of losing her, to her illness, or to Ethan and Celeste's world, was a weight so heavy it nearly broke me. That night, sleep never came. Only the sound of my own heartbeat, counting down to the moment the truth would shatter everything. The envelope came on a gray Tuesday. I opened it in my empty classroom, the walls echoing with silence. Genomic registry, results summary. Probability of paternity, Dr. Ethan Cole, 99.98%. The words blurred as tears filled my eyes. 5 years of secrecy, undone in a single line of text. That evening, I was leaving the grocery store when I heard him. Emily. I froze. Ethan stood under the streetlight, the envelope in his hand. His face was pale, his eyes stormy. I know, he said simply. The bag slipped from my arms, apples rolling across the pavement. Why didn't you tell me? His voice cracked. My chest burned. Because you didn't want us. He flinched. I didn't know she existed. She existed, I shot back. And I carried it alone. Every appointment, every night, every fear. I shouldered it all. Alone, his jaw tightened. She's my daughter. I shook my head. No, she's mine, and I won't let you or Celeste decide her fate. Emily, his voice lowered, pleading now. I'm the one trained for this. Her condition, it's my specialty. I can save her. The world tilted. My worst fear was true. The man who had once walked away now held my daughter's life in his hands. I turned, my voice trembling with steel. You don't get to walk back into our lives as a savior. Not now, not like this. And I left him standing under the buzzing streetlight, the DNA results clutched in his hand. Secrets are dangerous, but in the wrong hands, they become weapons. I learned that the moment I saw Celeste Grant standing at the end of the hallway, DNA results folder in her hand. She didn't wave it like a victory flag. She didn't need to. Her smile said everything. So, she said lightly, her heels clicking as she approached. It's true. My throat tightened. You have no right. Oh, Emily, she interrupted, her voice smooth as glass. This isn't about rights. It's about optics, reputation, stability, my fiancé's career. She tapped the folder against her palm. And this little piece of paper changes everything. I clenched my fists. It doesn't change the fact that Lila is my daughter. Her eyes glittered. No. But it changes how the world sees her, and you. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. Imagine what people will say. The struggling single mother who hid a child from her brilliant doctor husband. The woman who nearly cost him his reputation. Donors don't like messy stories, Emily. They like clean lines, noble sacrifices, not deception. I swallowed hard. This isn't about donors, it's about saving Lila. Oh, I agree, her smile sharpened, which is why I'll be taking care of things, for her sake, and Ethan's. A chill ran through me. What do you mean? You've become inconvenient. She flipped the folder shut. I've already spoken to the board about your lack of transparency. They're reconsidering your eligibility in the program. My stomach dropped. You can't. I can, she said, her voice low and certain. This hospital is my family's legacy. Every hallway has my name on it. Every donor listens to me, and every surgeon, including Ethan, depends on my approval. She leaned in, her perfume sharp, suffocating. So here's what will happen. You'll step aside, sign temporary guardianship over to Ethan for medical purposes. Let him handle her surgery under the hospital's care. If you fight this, Emily, you'll lose more than your pride. You'll lose her spot, and maybe her life. My chest burned with fury. You're blackmailing me. I'm protecting what's mine, she said simply. Ethan, his career, his future, and yes, your daughter. But don't mistake my generosity for weakness. One wrong move, and I'll make sure every door slams shut in your face. Then she turned, her heels echoing as she walked away, leaving me shaking, my nails digging into my palms until they hurt. That evening, I received a call from Marisol, my nonprofit caseworker. Her voice was tense. Emily, something's wrong. I just got notice from St. Grace. The board is reevaluating your case. They're claiming inconsistencies in your paperwork, custody, father's medical history. It looks like someone flagged it. I closed my eyes. Celeste. Marisol lowered her voice. Emily, be careful. I don't know how, but your daughter's slot is hanging by a thread. When I hung up, I sat in the dark apartment, the weight of it pressing down on me. For 5 years, I had carried everything alone. I thought the hardest part was hiding the truth, but the real battle was just beginning. Because now, the truth wasn't mine anymore. It belonged to Celeste, and she would use it to destroy me. There's a moment when grief hardens into resolve. For weeks, I had let Celeste define the rules. She humiliated me in public, delayed Lila's surgery, and now held my daughter's life like a bargaining chip. I had spent nights curled on the floor, begging the dark for strength I no longer believed I had. But then one night, as I watched Lila sleep, her small chest rising unevenly, a thought struck me. If I crumbled, she crumbled. If I gave up, she died. And I realized I couldn't afford to be invisible anymore. The next morning, I looked in the mirror at a woman I barely recognized. Tired eyes, faded clothes, a body bent by fear. That woman was finished. I put on my best dress. I pulled my hair back, straightened my shoulders, and for the first time in years I wore lipstick. Not for vanity, for armor. When I walked into St. Grace, I wasn't just a desperate mother. I was a woman ready for war. My first move was the press. Through my nonprofit caseworker Marisol, I contacted a journalist who had covered medical inequality. I told her everything, how charity cases were paraded for donors, how families were pressured into silence, how children's lives were weighed against appearances. I didn't use Ethan's name. Not yet. But I painted the Grants Foundation in stark colors, a kingdom where power decided who lived and who waited. My second move was legal. I went to a family lawyer, explained the DNA results, the threats, the attempt to force me into signing guardianship over to Ethan. The lawyer's eyes narrowed. They can't do that without due process. If they're using your daughter's medical needs to coerce you, that's not just unethical, that's illegal. She filed an injunction immediately. Suddenly, Celeste's recommendations to the board had a legal shadow following them. And then came the hardest move of all, facing Ethan. I asked him to meet me at a cafe near the hospital. He came in, still in scrubs, exhaustion lining his face. He sat across from me, waiting. I slid the folder across the table, the same one I'd carried for 5 years, stuffed with records, bills, photos, everything I had used to keep Lila alive. This is her life, I said. My voice didn't shake. Every page, every number, every fight I fought without you. You think you're the only one who can save her? No, I already did. For 5 years. Alone, he opened the folder. His hands trembled as he flipped through the pages, the receipts, the notes, the photo of Lila hooked to oxygen as a baby. Emily. His voice broke. I didn't let him speak. If you want to be her father, prove it. Not in an operating room, not in front of Celeste's donors. Prove it by standing with us, not over us. For the first time, I saw something in his eyes, not pity, not guilt, respect. That night, I walked through the hospital halls with my head high. Nurses who once looked through me now stepped aside. Parents who had whispered began to nod. Celeste noticed. She confronted me in the corridor, her smile brittle. Quite the transformation, Emily? Playing the brave mother for the cameras now? I met her gaze without flinching. Not playing, becoming. Her eyes narrowed. I leaned closer. You wanted me silent. You underestimated me. That was your first mistake. Your second was thinking Ethan would always choose you over the truth. Her face flickered, just for a second. I walked away before she could answer. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like prey. I felt like someone who was finally ready to fight back. The day of the hospital gala arrived with glitter and chandeliers. Donors sipped champagne, photographers circled, and the Grants basked in admiration, as if the building itself bore their crest. I hadn't planned to be there, but fate, or maybe courage, brought me back into that ballroom. This time, I wasn't hiding. Lila walked beside me, holding her stuffed fox, her cheeks flushed with nervous excitement. At her other side was Ethan, no longer just the star surgeon but a father, his hand resting protectively on her shoulder. And waiting inside were cameras, reporters, and Celeste, already glowing in a designer gown, smiling as though she'd won. When she spotted me, her smile froze. "Emily," she said sweetly, stepping forward. "What a surprise. I didn't think you'd show your face after." Her words cut off when she saw the microphone in my hand. The journalist Marisol had arranged waved us onto the stage. I took a breath. My heart raced, but my voice was steady. 5 years ago, I stood alone, raising a daughter with a broken heart, literally. I fought every day to keep her alive. And when I brought her here to St. Grace, I believed this hospital was about healing. But I've learned that healing is sometimes tangled in politics, power, and appearances. The ballroom went silent. I continued. Families like mine aren't props for donor applause. We aren't pawns in anyone's career. We are parents, fighting for our children's lives, and we deserve transparency, not manipulation. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Celeste's face tightened. She reached for the mic, but Ethan stepped forward, blocking her. "Emily's right," he said, his voice ringing out. "I've worked in this hospital for years, and I've seen the cracks in the system. We save children, but too often who gets saved depends on who has power. That ends tonight. Starting with my daughter, Lila." The room erupted in murmurs. Reporters scribbled furiously. Donors exchanged sharp looks. Celeste's mask finally cracked. "Your daughter?" she snapped, her voice too sharp for microphones to miss. "So it's true. You lied to me, to this hospital, to everyone. You let her manipulate you with a secret child." Her words backfired. Gasps turned to outrage. Donors frowned. Board members exchanged whispers. The picture was clear, a powerful woman trying to erase a child to protect her pride. One of the board members stood. "Dr. Grant, enough." His tone was icy. "This hospital is not your personal stage. The Parker case will move forward immediately." Celeste paled. In the chaos, Ethan turned to me, his eyes shining with something I hadn't seen in years, clarity. "Emily, I left because I thought ambition mattered more than love. I was wrong. I see that now. If you'll let me, I want to be in Lila's life, not as a surgeon, as her father." Tears burned my eyes. For the first time, his words felt real. But before I could answer, Lila tugged my hand and whispered into the mic she thought was off. "I just want us to be a family." The room melted. Even reporters lowered their pens, some wiping their eyes. That night, the board formally approved Lila's surgery. Immediate scheduling, covered entirely by the program. Celeste was suspended pending investigation into abuse of power. The Grants' empire cracked under the weight of public outrage. Days later, I sat outside the operating room as Ethan performed the surgery. Hours stretched like years. But when the doors finally opened, he emerged, exhausted, mask hanging around his neck, and whispered, "She's going to be okay." I broke down in tears of relief. Weeks later, Lila ran across the park for the first time in her life without gasping for breath. I chased after her, laughing, crying, alive in a way I hadn't been for years. Ethan stood a few feet away, watching with awe. We weren't suddenly whole, not yet. Trust had to be rebuilt, slowly, carefully, but for the first time, it felt possible. And as the sun dipped low, I held my daughter close and whispered, "We did it, baby. They tried to take everything from us, but we survived. We won." Because justice hadn't just been done. It had been seen. Spring came slowly that year. After the chaos, the hearings, the surgery, and the headlines, there was finally silence, the kind of silence that didn't suffocate but healed. I watched Lila run across the park, her laughter bright and free, her stuffed fox bouncing from her backpack. For the first time in her life, she didn't gasp for breath after 10 steps. She ran and kept running as though her heart had always been whole. I sat on a bench, the sun warm on my face, and let the moment sink in. For years, fear had been my shadow. Every cough, every monitor reading, every bill, I had lived braced for disaster. Now, for the first time, I let myself breathe without waiting for the next blow. Ethan joined us a moment later, carrying 2 ice creams. He handed one to Lila, who squealed in delight. She looked up at him with eyes full of trust. No hesitation, no history, just a child discovering her father one day at a time. He sat beside me, leaving a respectful space. For a while, we just watched her chase butterflies. "I'm not here to rewrite the past," he said quietly. "I can't. But I want to build the future, whatever you'll allow me to be, for her and for you." I didn't answer right away. I didn't need to. Healing isn't about rushing. It's about slow, steady steps. I glanced at him, then at our daughter, her laughter ringing through the air. And for the first time, I didn't feel anger when I looked at him. I felt possibility. I smiled softly. "One day at a time." He nodded. "One day at a time." As the sun dipped lower, painting the sky gold, I wrapped my arms around Lila when she came running back. Her heart beat strong against mine. We had survived the storm, and now, finally, we were learning how to live again.